Welcome to another episode of Witty CFB. Your host, Rob Sheply here. And on today's episode, we're going to be breaking down Rutgers versus Nebraska Week 6 matchup, one that I've been looking forward to all season. I've detailed Rutgers on this program. I've detailed Nebraska. I've talked about the pros, the cons, and definitely two programs in general to where I've been definitely most excited about because there's just a lot of intrigue surrounding both. I mean, Rutgers, for the most part, outside of the past 10 years or so, they've only made a bowl game or two. And when Greg Schiano came in, there was definitely a lot of rebuilding that had to be done. But if anybody was fit for that job, it definitely was him. So it's nice for it to come full circle and to see them get to such a great start. And meanwhile, over in Nebraska, there was a lot of pressure for Matt Rule to really get a strong start this year, especially when you have Dylan Raiola there. You have a really strong front seven, and a lot of Nebraska playmakers have been there for Raiola they've when Raiola's needed them. So it's really been a huge positive just all around for that program too. They're going to be facing off at 4 o'clock Eastern time at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I think this matchup excites me for a couple of reasons. I think first and foremost, I think Rutgers has definitely been a program that has definitely been underappreciated in general. They have lost their first, six meetings to Nebraska. They've done five in the Big Ten and one outside of that. But I think there's a lot of questions in terms of, you know, to what extent can Rutgers really make this a game? Because I think for the most part, anybody who's watched Rutgers football over the past couple years or has really seen Greg Schiano coach extensively, whether it was his first stint at Rutgers or his second stint, his teams have always had a pretty similar identity, which is being hard, being gritty, playing strong defense, letting his quarterback, make the right reads, make the right decisions, and obviously on the offense side of the ball, just primarily relying upon a strong rushing attack too. And when I look at this Rutgers program, I think the one thing that's definitely been a little bit of a letdown so far was that the defense just simply hasn't been as strong as the past couple seasons. I think there are a couple reasons for that. I think first and foremost, much like Nebraska and Auburn, who I talked about on the program a couple episodes ago, Rutgers, quite frankly, a young team. And one thing I've always admired about Greg Schiano is that they really don't hit the transfer portal that hard. They really build the foundation of the program through high school recruiting, and a lot of the assistants on the staff also do a really good job of it as well. So I think that's first and foremost that they're playing a lot of younger talent in general. I think secondarily too, I think the secondary has definitely taken a step back a little bit, which is, you know, to me, if you ask me what the weaknesses are on this Rutgers team, it's the linebacking core and the secondary, particularly giving up some of the big explosive plays and also the lack of tackling as well. If statistically speaking, Rutgers Washington had 14 broken tackles against Rutgers last weekend, and then versus Howard they had 11. So it goes to show that it's not so much that Rutgers can't get there or doesn't have the talent, but they definitely have to clean that up if they really want to have a shot at Nebraska, since they are definitely the most talented team all around that they're going to be playing up to this point. And with that said, you look at some of the stats here. Yeah, it's especially too when you've been giving up double digit points all throughout the season. I think it was about 20, 21, or 24 last weekend. And I think it's one of those things too where I watched Rutgers the past couple weeks, and I think what's missing from this Rutgers team is I haven't seen a legitimate complete game from them. Obviously the strong point of this team is having the 1-2 punch of Sam Brown and Kyle Monagai, who are both great runners and are definitely going to be heavily relied upon in order to beat Nebraska this week at all. But I think going into this, you would have thought that it would have been the other way around in terms of the offense would be the ones that's holding the team back. But in reality, I think it's really the defense. I mean, when you think about Rutgers' offense last year, I mean, Gavin Wimsatt, yeah, he's a solid runner, and he has some mobility and is a decent quarterback. But at the same time, he had some significant turnover issues last year, had some difficulty reading defenses, and ultimately transferred to Kentucky this offseason, where he's a backup to Brock Vandergriff. But you got to admit though, even though like none of Rutgers' offensive stats are flashy or anything special, I mean, they they've generally looked sharp on offense. They've played really physical regardless of what team they're playing, and you have to imagine too that generally speaking, they're gonna depend on this rushing attack and really in order to have a chance at getting an upset here. Because you got to imagine too, whoever I would argue whoever wins this game is definitely going to be on the cusp of possibly being ranked too. Because I think Nebraska and Rutgers, if you look at them, they're probably somewhere between the 25 and 35 range in terms of an AP poll. I don't have the numbers on that right in front of me, but in general, I think if you're Rutgers, I think this is really the game where you really do need a legitimate complete game where your secondary has some strong tackling. The Rutgers defensive line creates some pressure for under tries to pressure Raiola, much like Illinois' defensive line did. And I think also you're going to have to find a way for that passing game to really get going, because if if their rushing attack gets stalled in any sort of way, then I definitely think you could be in for some trouble or possibly a long day. And then on the flip side of that, when I think about this Nebraska team, defensive coordinator Tony White, who they're ranked right now 19th nationally in the country. I mean, when I look at this Nebraska team, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, I see a team that's athletic, that's experienced. I'd say experienced for the most part outside of the secondary. I think the secondary is still a little bit young, and I think generally speaking, that was the criticism that people would kind of come back to. But for the most part, they've they've been solid. I mean, even though I think we all kind of knew they wouldn't be as strong on the back end as they are in the front seven, but for the most part, they've done everything that they needed to do in order to really, put themselves in a situation where realistically they could be a top 25 team after this week. And also, you got to give them credit to it; they're a well disciplined team, and you got to imagine. I think this is why I'm emphasizing the defenses a lot more, because, in my opinion, this is going to be very much a low scoring battle of the trenches. A lot of running, a lot of running the ball, and also you have to imagine too the weather right now. It's projected to be 98 degrees there. Some significant wind gusts are also going to be pretty prevalent too. And when you mix that all around, it's you got to anticipate that there's going to be some struggles passing the ball. And when I've watched Dylan Raiola this year, I was really excited to watch him. I mean, after I was watching his spring ball, and I've watched him versus Colorado and a couple other games that Nebraska has had on the schedule, I do think this kid's legit. I mean, he's looked poised, he's looked confident. I think he looks like he's just having fun out there, which is one thing I think that's a little bit different in college compared to the pros. Is sometimes it's just great to just see guys who look like they're having a good time, who are well coached, and that success is feeding his teammates, which is really exciting to see. And also, he's had some great weapons around him, like Isaiah Nair, who was with Wyoming and Texas before. He has right now 17 receptions, 291 yards. So he's been a really strong fit for this program. But when you look at when you look at Nebraska offensively, I think first and foremost, I think you're going to have to find a way to play some complementary football, in the sense of, I think if you can really find a way to get that play action going and be able to keep that Rutgers defense honest, I think you can really take advantage of some of the of that secondary, particularly, maybe if you're going for some deep shots, or even somewhere in the middle where you can get an opportunity for Nair to be in open space and be able to break a couple tackles and possibly get some long some long plays there. And you know, it's going to be exciting because it's one of the most iconic venues in all of college football, not just the Big Ten. And right now Rutgers, they're 3-11 in conference road games as it stands under Greg Schiano in his second stint. So all things considered, it's going to be exciting for this game. I think whoever wins this game, this definitely will be a sort of pendulum shifting towards their momentum. I definitely wouldn't count out Rutgers, but at the same time, too, yes, they are 4-0, but I do think there are some glaring issues on the defensive side of the ball that are going to have to be fixed. And you also do have that 1-2 punch on the Rutgers side of the ball that I think you're going to have to capitalize on, and definitely be able to try to get Galifianakis to just be able to throw the ball even just a little bit. I mean, even just a touchdown pass or two to get that pressure off of that to get the pressure off of a Monagai and Sam Brown would be a big deal. And then when you look at this Nebraska team, I think you really just have to do more of the same of what you're doing now. Let that defense take over in the trenches. Have Raiola continue to be calm, poised, and relaxed. I mean, obviously you saw the Illinois game, even though there were a lot of moments where he's made some spectacular plays and he's looked poised and confident, all that stuff. I think that game showed that he's still a rookie in many senses too. He is gonna make some mistakes, and but ultimately, Nebraska has done enough to the point where it hasn't totally hurt him too bad in a lot of these matchups, particularly in the Big Ten. So this has definitely been a game that was on my calendar even 2 months ago, and you know, for the most part too, it should be a pretty exciting matchup. Two teams who are evenly matched and also have that same sort of pedigree and personality that I think will translate well in this Big Ten matchup this weekend.